Dear families and friends of St. Kevin's Parish community, greetings. Hoping and praying that you are well and safe. In this video presentation, I would like to share some thoughts on the virtue of hope. A virtue that is so vital to each and every one of us in the midst of the hardships and struggles of the COVID-19 pandemic that continues to affect our lives in more ways than we could have ever imagined. In the 1950s, a scientist named Richter conducted an interesting experiment. He took a dozen domesticated rats and placed them into jars half filled with water. Unsurprisingly, the rats drowned. But the idea was to measure the amount of time they swam before they gave up and went belly up. The first rat, Richter noted, swam around and died 2 minutes later. Two more of the 12 domesticated rats died in pretty much the same way. But interestingly, the 9 remaining rats did not succumb quite so readily. They swam for days before they eventually gave up and died. A second time, Richter conducted the experiment with wild rats renowned for their swimming abilities. What's worth noting is that the ones he used had been recently trapped and were fierce and aggressive. One by one, he dropped them into the water, and one by one, they surprised him. Within minutes of entering the water, they all drowned. What kills these rats, he wondered. Why do all the fierce, aggressive, wild rats die promptly upon immersion, and only a small number of the similarly treated, tame, domesticated rats? The answer in one word: hope. You see, the wild rats clearly understood that there was no way they would get out of the jar. They understood that they were in a situation against which they had no defense. So they gave up. Richter later tweaked the experiment a little bit. He took other wild rats and placed them into the jar. But right before they were expected to die, he picked them up, held them a little while, and placed them back in the jar. In this way, he wrote, the rats quickly learned that the situation is not actually hopeless. As it appears, this small pause made a huge difference. The rats that experienced a brief reprieve swam much longer and outlasted the rats that were left alone. When the rats learned that they were not doomed and that the situation was not lost, they had a reason to keep swimming, and they did. At the conclusion of the experiment, Richter wrote, after elimination of hopelessness, the rats do not die. Dear friends, obviously, humans are quite different from rats. But one similarity stands out. We all need a reason to keep swimming. Hope is the driving force that keeps us moving forward even when we are weary. At a time when many of us may feel a bit weary and have trouble finding reasons to hope in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, we who are people of faith have the sacred responsibility of offering that hope to the people around us. But of course, first, we have to be filled with hope. Only then can we give it to others. For as the saying goes, we cannot give something that we don't have. For each of us, hope is vital to our very existence. Author John Ortberg describes hope as the fuel that the human heart runs on. He writes, a car crash or an accident can paralyze the body, but the death of hope paralyzes the spirit. In Christian thought, hope is described as one of the three theological virtues, the others being faith and charity or love. Charles Piggy, a famous French poet, describes hope as the little sister that walks between the taller sisters of faith and charity. When the taller sisters grow tired, the little one instills new life and energy into them. Hope never allows our faith to grow weak or our love to falter. The theological virtue of hope is based on the conviction that God is at work in our lives and in our world. To be a hopeful person is to face the future with a deeply personal knowledge of God's love for the world and for oneself. God is the source of our hope. God who showed His unconditional love in and through His Son Jesus Christ, and who shows His love through the Holy Spirit. And God who will continue to love our world. Even if by definition hope refers to the future, for a Christian it is rooted in the present, in the knowledge of God walking with us here and now, in the trust we have in God, in the working of God's Spirit here and now. The questions for us are, in the midst of the pandemic, where do we see signs of hope? And how has God picked us up out of the water, like the researcher did with the struggling rats? There are many moments over the last few months that God has held us up in His hand, giving us small pauses and moments of reprieve, which ultimately give us hope. Those moments are present all around us, but I can specially recall a few. When I visited the hospital last week, I could see the healthcare team so tenderly accompanying their sick and dying patients. I've seen it amongst the essential service workers when I have gone to the grocery stores, who risk their safety to serve their communities. And I know a parishioner who calls 8 of her neighbors and friends every week to check on them and to encourage them during this difficult time. And even in the news, there are many uplifting stories that can give us hope. There are countless individuals that take all the precautionary measures to stop the spread of the virus, all while preserving and even strengthening our human connection. I read about a group of 60 medical students in Ottawa who are providing child care to allow doctors, nurses, and paramedics to get to work, while another group is providing grocery delivery service to seniors. I'm certain the researchers who are trying to find a vaccine for the virus experience hope with each new breakthrough. My dear friends, with the grace and help of God, we will overcome this pandemic. Meanwhile, as we remain in it, let us be people of hope. Let us be fueled by hope, and let us offer hope to one another, lifting one another out of the water and providing those much needed reprieves. God bless you all.